Again, a warm welcome today as we gather to open up God's Word for us. Needless to say, we continue to live in most interesting times. There is that very thin line between hope and despair. We know that on many levels, in our own personal lives, our life as a church, our life as a nation, our life as a world community. Straddling that very thin line. And how do we find hope? How do we deal with despair in our life when we just can't seem to see the next step? I found it interesting that recently, one solution that Pope Francis was offering, that he invited over 100 comedians to visit the Vatican to celebrate the power and the importance of humor. When I first heard that, it occurred to me that for those of which there are many who continue to try to find direction in the church, who try to find hope and a message, it seems to me that we would have never survived if we didn't already know about a sense of humor. It becomes very important for us. The Pope went on to say that laughter unites people. To wit, I would have said, my good friend Francis, so do unkind words. So does sometimes a lack of welcome. Not only doesn't bring people together, it actually divides us. So again, a little bit, not a mixed message, but they have to consider both sides here. God knows we all value a sense of humor. I've been involved in several funerals here at Joan of Arc in the last number of days. It occurs to me, as I have mentioned before, that in many ways we are sojourners, each of us. We are given this time to live in this space. And we came in and we will move on. In the meanwhile, we're here. It's a person, a sojourner, resides temporarily in a place. A truth about being a sojourner, I believe, is that if we laugh and sing a little as we fight the good fight of freedom, it does indeed make all things go a bit easier. I believe we need to be committed to the belief that we will never allow life's light to be determined by the darkness around us. We cannot adjust the brightness of our light by the darkness that surrounds us. We need to be able to continue that light forward. Robert Kennedy included in his Day of Affirmation address in Cape Town, South Africa, in 1966, this rendition of a familiar phrase. Kennedy said at that time, "There is a Chinese curse which says, 'May we live in interesting times.' Like it or not," he continued, "we do live in interesting times. They are times of danger and uncertainty. But they are also the most creative of any time in all of our shared history." Close quote. In truth, "May you live in interesting times" is widely reported as being of Chinese origin. But it is neither Chinese nor is it necessarily ancient. It is actually rather quite recent and of Western origin. The importance of not letting go, of not letting our light be determined by the darkness around us. That's a critical decision that we need to make. In our not-so-United States, in less than 5 months, we will have completed our national elections. The political rancor is perceived by many as dark, as divisive, and quite frankly, exhausting. May we live with hope in these most interesting times as our democracy is challenged in so many ways. The UN Human Rights Mission in Ukraine report that there have been at least 10,000 civilians, including more than 560 children, killed since Russia launched the full-scale attack. 12,300 children have been killed in Gaza since last October. May we live with compassion in these most interesting times as thousands die as a result of war. The ongoing struggles within our own larger church to stay committed to our open dialogue and discernment in reimagining a church that welcomes everyone, affirms women to serve in all aspects of the faith community. May we live with courage in these interesting times of fear and resistance to change among much of our leadership and many members of the larger church. The parable of the seeds is intended to be one of encouragement for struggling communities, frustrated or in fact despondent as a result of what seems like such a small and insignificant growth of the kingdom of God and its impact again on the world. In direct contrast, as Pope John the 23rd expressed the hope in laying down the purpose for the Second Vatican Council, and I quote the good Pope, that, he says, that the church would be blessed with a new energy that would open the way for all leaders and all members to look to the future without fear. To look to the future without fear. So, John the 23rd, how did that work out for you? We still struggle. We've come, in many ways, a long time. Vatican Council was a long time ago. I realize our time and church time are very different. Nonetheless, we continue to need to be and to look at our future with a sense of hope. I will not allow my life's light to be determined by the darkness and the fear of this world, of this nation, or of this church. These words from the Jewish Talmud, which is the primary source of Jewish religion law as well as theology. These words from the Talmud provide hope and direction and a most important reminder to never give up. From the Talmud, do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. We are sojourners. This is our time. The parables that we have received in today's gospel are meant to draw our attention to the importance of having hope in all situations, to greet each day with an openness to hope, even if we feel we have thoroughly considered all of the facts. Those times in our world community, our nation, and our church that we simply do not know how to practice resurrection. How to be hopeful. The seeds are scattered in the field, as well as the tiny mustard seed sown on the ground are the smallest of all seeds on the planet. But once sown, the seed springs up and becomes the largest of all plants. When planted and nurtured from a place of hope and love, their growth is clearly not an overnight phenomenon. However, overcoming all of the challenges and all of the obstacles, the one seed yields a bountiful harvest, and the mustard seed produces a safe home for the birds of the sky. The Dutch post-impressionist painter Vincent van Gogh, we often say, I'm told it's actually Vincent van Gogh, reminds us that great things are done by a series of small things brought together. I say today, stay faithful in things that are large and taking on the world, but stay faithful in those things small, because remember, it's the small things, the size of that mustard seed, that ultimately moves mountains as well as moving the human heart. In my experience as a pastor, the two most consistent concerns and fears that I hear from many has to do with struggling to be hopeful, as well as feeling an ongoing, stinging lack of kindness in our human interactions. A stinging lack of kindness. I often find myself going back in time and taking comfort in the memories of an earlier time in life. It's probably something all of us do, hopefully, on occasion. Even though it has been said that Nebraska may not have been for everyone, it definitely was for me in my early life. I feel blessed with many good memories of those that took the time and planted seeds in the landscape of my early life that continue to flourish over the last soon-to-be 3/4 of a century. Those seeds are still making a difference. So I am going to take you down one of my memory lanes, and I have talked about the Myrtle story before. In the days that I worked more with family mass and young children, I would use the Myrtle story around First Reconciliation or First Communion or a variety of things. I've mentioned Myrtle before. Never before have you seen a photograph of her. This is Myrtle. She was my babysitter. Myrtle ran the Shady Rest home. Myrtle had a dog named Tippy. Myrtle cared for about 8 elderly gentlemen who lived in the Shady Rest home. She was my babysitter. She wore cotton house dresses. She had hairy legs. And she had quite a few teeth. And I knew that because she would smile frequently. She made noodles all the time. If I behaved myself, well, you should probably, first of all, see who Myrtle had to deal with. That would be me. So you may wonder about the early years of Hop-Along Cassidy. Yep, that's me. 1 week after you heard all about gun control last Sunday. So this is who Myrtle had to deal with, me, and she loved me dearly, and I loved her. And if all went well, and I succeeded in eating my lunch, taking my nap, then it would be a matter of we're going to go on that fantastic around-the-world tour. So she would call her best friend, Ethel Potter, who lived just down the block. She was married to Peter Potter, who actually made shoes in this little town. You'd think I would see Walt Disney every time I turned around, but so Ethel Potter would come down to the Shady Rest rest home, and we would all pile into our chariot. A Pontiac Chieftain, olive green with white wall tires. Ethel and Tippy would pile into the back seat. Myrtle would put pillows on the passenger side for me, and Myrtle had to pile pillows for herself on the driver's side because those hairy legs could not touch the floorboard without pillows. Well, then we had to decide before we got in the car where we wanted to go that day. This town was about 4 blocks wide, 8 blocks long. So I had choices. I could go possibly to Italy. We could go to London. We could go to Egypt. And once we had decided, we would select the country we were going to. In went Egypt. So the car would snake around this town, and I would sit in the passenger seat. And I would look at the pyramids. I would see the Nile. I would see the Sphinx. And I swear to this very day, those 2 women made it so. No matter where we went, they could speak the language. They knew fluent Egyptian or Italian or wherever we went. I was in awe. What I remember about that going on 75 years later, when I sat on those pillows with those 2 women, I had no doubt but what I was loved. I had no doubt. I had every reason to be hopeful. Such a gift that when life gets a little off the rails, this many years later, I can get on those pillows in that Pontiac with those 2 women and go to any place I want because I know I'm going to be loved. I encourage all of us today who look for that renewed sense of hope, who look for those people in our life who planted those seeds, but also think of our own ability and our own call to be those seeds of hope to those around us. We can't lose hope because people look to us too frequently to be that hope, to be that encouragement, to be kind, to be kind. The reign of God is like an insignificant seed. It's overlooked by most. It's too often controlled by those who are blinded by fear and unwilling to change. The reign of God is most assuredly cherished by those who know that the reign of God is brimming with potential. Living our faith reimagined and living our faith out loud is indeed an invitation meant for all people. St. Joan of Arc, may we always believe in our potential. May we always remember that we are the church. Amen.